Hello and welcome to That's Absurd. Please elaborate. I am half of the typical pie that you would find, maybe pumpkin, I'm not sure, cherry. Either way, I'm half the pie. I'm Trace Dominguez.
And I'm a cutie pie, Julian Huguet. Also the other half of your hosting duo. For That's Absurd, please elaborate, the science possibly humorous podcast where we take the weirdest, wackiest, most outlandish questions from each other, listeners, guests, and we do our very best to apply our science researching skills and find the real answer for you, the listeners.
Wow,
that felt really official.
That was very official.
I got into a groove.
I just want to take a second, since you sounded so official, and welcome all our new listeners. We've had a lot of growth over the last couple months. We peaked at number 24 in the U.S. in the science charts. It was amazing in April. It was awesome.
No. People might be quoting us to their friends now when they have something interesting to share at a cocktail party.
That would be so cool.
That's a big responsibility.
I hope we don't mess it up.
Oh no. I don't take it lightly.
I don't either.
Heavily.
With cream?
With cream? I was gonna whipped with a little bit of caramel drizzle. That's how we take your questions, listeners. That's how serious we do.
Thank you, everyone who listens, who tells your friends about it, who asks questions. We could not do this show without an audience. I mean, we could, but it would be way different.
We did for a while.
But we thank you all for joining us here on our podcast. And we've been doing this weekly now for a while. It's so stressful and so fun. Whew, it's a lot more, but we're into it. We're excited. So let's get started with our first listener question of today, which comes from who, Julian? Or
this
is it
question,
whom? Who?
It comes from whom? Whom would be correct? Because the question's the subject and the person's the object. Anyway, the whom in question is Brandon. Brandon asks, what if every set of DNA passed on from each individual were identical respectively? Now, Brandon goes on, he says, okay, for example, if every one of a person's sperm/eggs were identical to each other, but different from any other individual. And the first thing that I had to grapple with was how would that happen?
Yeah.
Right? How do you get every single egg cell or sperm cell or whatever to be identical for an individual, but different for everybody else? So I had to think a little bit about, my Bio 101 and how we make sperm/egg cells.
Yeah.
Right? So starting there, I think is a
gametes.
Yeah, the old gametes. Our cells all throughout our body are dividing, right?
Sure.
Because they need to replicate, and they'll, eventually they die off, and they need to replace themselves, and they need to grow, and organs, and things like that, right?
We are amazing multicellular creatures.
Yes. Do you remember the name of the process for when our cells in the rest of our body, our somatic cells, are splitting apart and duplicating? And
is that mitosis, or is it?
That would be mitosis.
It's not meiosis.
Because you make two of the same thing,
right? And meiosis is not. That's you're making another one of itself.
Yes. Meiosis is when you're forming sperm or egg cells for the purpose of then, combining them together and making the next generation of offspring.
Yeah.
And that process works differently, right? So in mitosis, your cells take all the DNA, right, that are in chromosomes.
Yeah.
And they copy themselves, and then they split apart so that each cell has the same number of chromosomes, the same number of copies of those chromosomes, right? So humans, we have, how many chromosomes do we have total?
400.
It's a little high.
Oh, wait, no.
You're shooting a little high. This is just a scooch over.
In the documentary, The Fifth Element, they found a space hand, and in the space hand, it was densely packed, hundreds and hundreds of base pairs. It was engineered to be a perfect being.
The more I do this podcast with you, the more I realize that your brain only functions in 90s movies like Demolition Man and The Fifth Element.
Look, that may be true, but, but you don't have to tell everybody about
Chris
it.
sees the world entirely through a 90s action movie lens.
There's a lot of triangles and neon squiggles. It's pretty awesome, I have to say.
A lot of short, tough leading men
that are all short kings. Lots
short
of short kings.
Short kings the lot. Standing on apple boxes. Okay.
48, right? We have 48. So.
You're close. Again, Price is Right rules.
77.
Now you're just saying numbers. We have a total of 46, but the thing is they are in pairs. They're, for the most part, they're duplicates of each other, right?
Right.
So really we have 23 chromosomes doubled for a total of 46. Right? And half of those, one set of the 23, they came from one parent, your dad, and the other half came from the other parent, your mom.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you get them, and in the rest of your body, your somatic cells everywhere else, when your cells need to duplicate, you clone all those 46, and you put them in the new cell, and you have a perfect copy of your next cell. Ideally. Except when it comes to your gametes.
Oh.
Yeah, so that's where meiosis takes place, right? In your gametes, you want to have, instead of the full 46, the double complement of chromosomes, you want to have just one set of chromosomes.
Yeah.
And then when you combine them with an egg, bam, that new zygote has the complete set of 46. And again, you continue this diploid propagation. So because we have 2 copies of each chromosome, we are diploids. The gametes, though, with only one copy of everything, those are haploid. Those are the terms. Okay.
Yes, I remember these terms from biology.
Yay. Basic bio. So the process of meiosis, though, is super useful for just organisms in general. It's a great reproductive strategy because it introduces a lot of genetic variation in the offspring, right? So not only are you combining those 2 different sets of chromosomes to, mix up the genes a little bit, but even before those 2 sets of chromosomes get together, during that process of forming the sperm or egg cells, you're mixing up the genes in that process of meiosis.
Right.
So during this process of meiosis, when the chromosomes pair up to be, sorted into different future gametes, they do literally cross over in certain places and they exchange DNA. So even though half the chromosomes involved came from your mom and half came from your dad, when they cross over, now they're kind of shuffling up the genes from mom and dad, and the gametes are going to get some sort of mix, right? You're not passing on only like chromosome
1 to
21 from dad.
Exactly.
Some of chromosome 21 is going to be from mom too. And on top of that, the chromosomes also randomly assort. So instead of like one sperm cell only getting the dad genes and the next sperm cell only getting mom genes, some of those chromosomes are going to be from mom, some of them are going to be from dad. And then again, like I said, there's going to be shuffling within those chromosomes. So some pieces of those chromosomes are going to be from the opposite parent. So when you get all this, it is like shuffling a deck of cards. Cool. And you combine them with your partner's shuffled up deck of cards, and you get an offspring that's got all these different traits combined together.
Yeah.
Right?
This is the basis of all of our biology. Without this, how do we evolve? How do we change? How does anything?
So, if you do, well, there are, mutations that occur along the way during the gametogenesis, right? And so offspring might also get other mutations as a result of this, not just the alleles that are from mom and dad, but those might also get mixed up and changed, and a new trait might emerge as a result. But because of this shuffling of genes too, right? Because the offspring are so varied, then you have, some offspring that are going to do better and some that are not going to do better. Uh-oh. And the ones that do better tend to survive and have offspring, and that's called natural selection.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was a great background. What was the question again?
So Brandon's question is, what if every set of DNA from each individual were identical respectively?
Yeah. So like you have 100% Julian DNA, and your offspring has 100% Julian DNA.
No.
Oh.
That's not what Brandon's asking.
Okay, because that's what I thought. That's okay. So what is?
Well, I thought that too, but that would just be asexual reproduction, which is a thing.
You just kind of like go in your little closet and privately split yourself into two.
I just bud off. A little like tiny me like hops out from my side.
Like an Invader Zim Pustulio.
I am Pustulio! The hypnotic zit. Oh, wow. Another solid 90s reference.
Thank you.
But no, if you think about it, that's not really what Brandon's getting at. That wouldn't be the consequence of Brandon's question. Because he's saying every person's sperm and eggs were identical to each other, but different from any other individual. So he's saying, like, we still make sperm cells, we still make egg cells.
Yeah.
But those sperm and eggs, there's no difference between any of them. For me, Julian's sperm's all exactly the same. Every single little...
So you're still diploid. Well, they're haploid, but you personally are still diploid. But, like, your haploid is always the same.
Well, here's the thing. How would they all be the same if they were haploid?
Yeah.
They couldn't be.
Right? Yeah.
Because of that splitting up genes from mom and dad and shuffling them and the crossover recombination, right?
Yeah.
That couldn't occur for Brandon's scenario to be true, right?
Yeah. We wouldn't be able to shuffle our genetic code. How would you decide which of the 46 chromosomes we put into the 23? Do you just like, oh, well, dads are always giving 1 to 23 and moms are always giving 24 to 46? Like, that wouldn't work.
You could possibly, like have, okay, they segregate the same, and then, like, the ones from sperm cell 2 and 4 always get eliminated, and then, like, 1 and 3 are identical or something like that. But it would probably be impractical. What I'm thinking is much more likely in this scenario, our sperm and egg cells would also have to be diploid, right?
Oh.
It would just be all the genetic information, again, copied, but instead it's like ready to go and merge with another gamete that's also a diploid.
Whoa, that could be fun.
It could be. And the thing is, this isn't unheard of.
Really?
Really. Because there are organisms in nature that are not just diploid. They don't just have 2 sets of chromosomes.
Okay.
They have more than 2 complete sets, and they are polyploid.
Wow. I mean, that's super cool right now, like, to be poly.
Poly, like, very open-minded.
Like, very
hip. Open-minded
Something
plants.
people are, like, really into right now, talking about.
Yes. So that would have to be the scenario that would satisfy Brandon's question, right? That way, all of the sperm or eggs that each individual has, they would all be identical to each other.
Right. They're basically saying, here is all my genetic material. And then you put that in a little packet and you hand it to somebody else. You're like, here's all your genetic material.
Here's all of me.
Everything I got.
Everyone else is only putting half themselves into this.
Oh, no.
Not me.
I'm 100% kind of guy.
So there are organisms that are polyploids. It's common, actually, surprisingly, among plants, as well as certain groups of fish and amphibians. So some salamanders, some frogs, and leeches, they are polyploid.
It's always those salamanders.
They are freaks, I tell you.
So interesting.
They are.
You're like, cut off my arm, Daddy. I'll grow a new one. Give me all your genes.
These freaky deaky salamanders. Okay.
No wonder that axolotl's so happy. It's living its best life.
Down there in the
kinky
dark.
life. Love it.
I'm just picturing getting art from a lister of like a salamander in like a gimp suit.
Listener, you heard it here. You heard it. This is what Julian wants.
Okay. Now, I don't know if axolotls are
no, I don't
polyploidy, I should say, but they are juvenile salamanders, basically. Anyway, moving on. It gets more complicated, though, because a lot of these, plants in question, they're not polyploid in that 2 of the same species of plants combined gametes, and you got, like something with 4 sets of chromosomes.
Okay.
They are frequently what's called allopolyploidy.
Like they're very well moisturized.
Not ALOE, but ALLO.
Okay.
Ooh. No. So allopolyploidy means that they have more than 2 sets of chromosomes, but from different species.
Wait.
Yeah. I know.
I don't even...
Yeah, you're thinking about it.
I have no idea how that would work.
So how it would work was plants are out there just pollinating away, just throwing that pollen around. They don't really seek out other plants that are the same species, and that pollen might go and fertilize a plant of another species, and the offspring might have the chromosomes from both different species.
Plants are so freaky.
Yeah. So in that case, you get this new offspring that actually it has some benefits. You have possibly more resistance to negative recessive traits that like a dominant trait would normally cover up. Well, let's say like you get 2 recessive genes and it would be bad for this offspring, but the other species also codes for something that makes up for that deleterious effect.
Right.
Right. You see this a lot actually in plant breeding. There's something called hybrid vigor.
Cool.
And that is you might take 2 super inbred strains of something, and then when you combine them, like an ear of corn where one's like really gross and dinky and the other one, maybe the kernels aren't very delicious, and then you combine them and you get this amazing like super corn.
Okay.
And the reason is the one that maybe it was dinky and gross, maybe it makes delicious kernels, and that gets expressed, and then the one that's big and sexy but not tasty, the big and sexy gets expressed, and so you get these big sexy kernels. I haven't had lunch. I think that's why I'm talking about food
going
like
on
this.
over here. Like, geez, we're talking about sexy and like
Get
now our corn is all like zaddying out. What's happening over there?
Okay, I'm gonna rein it in. I'm gonna try and rein it in a little
household.
bit. I apologize to everybody listening. Okay. So with allopolyploidy, that's a possible benefit. You could also get these genes that maybe they're being expressed, coding for stuff, but they're not necessarily being useful. They might get actually repurposed for other reasons. So it's thought that it can make them a lot hardier and better suited for harsh environments or very wide-ranging environments, right?
Yeah.
But what we're talking about here, what Brandon is getting at, is autopolyploidy, where the same species contributes and you have multiple extra copies of the complete set of chromosomes. And that does happen. We've seen it in nature. But we're also, remember, saying with Brandon's question that every person's sperm and eggs is the same. So with Brandon's scenario, this is going to multiply over generations, right? Like, say it starts with our generation that everybody passes on diploid gametes, right?
Got it.
And then we all have babies.
Yeah.
And those babies, those are all tetraploidy. They all have 4 copies of each chromosome.
So they get
when they get together and have their children, hopefully a long way down the line, not when they're babies. Not immediately, right? I care about my children's children because I think my children are too young to be having children. When they get together, then those offspring are going to have 8 sets of chromosomes, right? And now, this is when the worst parts of polyploidy are probably going to become really apparent. So, cell volume is actually correlated with just how much DNA is in the cell nucleus, right?
Okay.
DNA, there's a lot of DNA. It's long.
Yeah, it's really long. What
When
is it
it's
if you
in chromosomes-
stretched it out?
Yeah.
It would be, I can't remember, but it'd be long.
Yeah, if somebody took all the DNA in your body and laid it out end to end, you would die because your cells would all have been put in a blender. But no, it's long. There's a lot of DNA in your chromosome.
6 feet. Googled it.
6 feet.
6 feet and
6
or
feet
2
per cell?
Look, I just Googled it and closed the tab because I'm a tab closing man. Each cell in the human body contains DNA that is 2 meters long.
Okay.
That's
3 each cell.
Each cell. Each
okay.
cell.
And then you have what, trillions of cells?
Yeah. That's a lot of DNA. You know what I'm saying?
It is.
That's
it is, in fact, a lot,
DNA.
right? Well, now imagine you double it, and then you double it again, and then you double it again, right? All of that's got to fit in the nucleus, which in turn has to fit inside the whole cell. So cell volume is going to go up. But with cells, a big reason cells have a maximum size is because as volume of the cell increases, the surface area of the cell does not increase proportionally.
Oh,
right?
That makes sense, I guess. Yeah. But still, like, ooh, this is not
It's
sustainable.
a basic fact of geometry, right? Like, if the volume's twice as big, the surface area is not twice as big.
Right.
So cells rely on a balance of things coming in and out, and if they're too large, then they can't exchange things with their environment at an acceptable rate, and it's bad for the cell. This also is true for the nucleus of the cell. Like, some genes might get signaled by things on the outside of the nucleus, and if the nucleus doesn't have enough of these receptors, that can throw that balance of gene expression out of whack.
Yeah.
So that's
bad.
Not great, right?
No. As we all know, you need a good nucleus in order to have cells.
As we all know. As it was written. It can also, if we have more than 2 sets of chromosomes, it can also be difficult just for the normal function of meiosis and mitosis. Because remember, even mitosis involves copying all the chromosomes and then splitting them up so each new daughter cell has this correct amount of chromosomes.
Right.
Well, if you start having more copies of these chromosomes, there's more opportunities for an uneven distribution of chromosomes in the new cells that you're creating.
Yeah. So
we see this with polyploids, where when the cells divide, now sometimes, if they had like 4 sets of chromosomes to start with, sometimes the new cells, one of them has 3 sets of chromosomes and the other has 1 set of chromosomes.
Yeah. That would be bad if you're used to having 4.
Exactly. Or even like within the chromosomes, like you might get a mishmash too. Like, you might get some floaters that just kind of randomly are like, I'm going into this one instead of the one that I'm supposed to go into, because they don't like attach to the machinery correctly.
Yeah, because a nice reminder here is that biology is not digital technology. It's not like, oh, well, it's always 0-1 and everything is super clean and does everything exactly like it's supposed to. Mm-hmm. That is not how biology is.
No, biology is quite messy and sticky.
Very sticky.
Very sticky.
And gooey.
Yeah. So you get instances of within specific cells, like chromosomes not assigning correctly. And it also happens during meiosis, which I guess in Brandon's scenario, we're not really caring about meiosis specifically, but still, if we're making gametes and there's more chance for the gametes to segregate incorrectly, even if they are all like having the same number of chromosomes, you're going to get more instances of disorders that are associated with an even segregation of chromosomes. Like for humans, even right now, Down syndrome is a result of this, right? Yeah. Where you have aneuploidy, where one chromosome tags along into a gamete, one extra, and that leads to Down syndrome.
Yeah.
So imagine we multiply that out generation over generation, and the odds of that get worse and worse and worse. It would be, frankly, unsustainable.
Yeah, I mean, just the volume of DNA we're talking. You end up with a nucleus with a couple sets of chromosomes. You double it to 4. You double it. What's that old saying? I see it on the internet all the time. It's like, if you take a penny and you double it this many times, you're at 1 billion. And it's like not that many times. So we're talking about that. But for your
like
genetics.
A handful of generations.
It's like a handful of generations, and you have more DNA than there are people in the state of Michigan.
Oodles of DNA.
And in each cell.
So much unnecessary DNA, right? So you would probably see, though, the offspring recessive traits wouldn't be as expressed because of that hybrid vigor, because, there wouldn't be as many opportunities for people to be homozygous recessive, which is when you only get like a recessive traits from your parents. So you might get like blue eyes when your parents both have brown, that sort of thing. Right. You wouldn't see that as often either. But yeah, more importantly, the number of biological things that will go wrong in a few generations, the odds of it just skyrockets.
Yeah, I mean...
So it's not a good thing.
What it makes me think of is when I was in college, I skipped CS 105, which was like the very basic computers course. Here's a spreadsheet. Here's what you do. And I was like, I'd had computers for 10 years at that point. So I took CS 111, which was the next one in the thing. And it was Unix programming in C++. And it was just like, oh my God. But anyway, what I learned there is it's important to have really good, clean code. The computer will run better. You won't use as much memory. And what you're talking about reminds me of like, we have really messy code. Not only do we have code we basically have 25 copies of this exact program, but it's all in the same like program file. And so it's trying to figure out, you get one little mistake and all of a sudden you're running code from a different version of the program and it's just not going to work.
Yeah, and you're wasting a lot if we're going to keep with the program metaphor, which I know is among biologists not popular.
Yeah, not cool.
Because a lot of people use it as an excuse to be like, well, who's the programmer? So like, we'll just say it's a metaphor and it's not perfect. But we're also wasting a lot of quote unquote, computing power to make a lot more, products of our cells unnecessarily. Right.
Yeah, that's a good point. You have to do all that. You have to take physical things to make that DNA. It's a real object. That means energy. That means material has to be created to make it.
We do see, for the most part, when there are polyploid organisms, their cells do produce usually proportionally more products. So, you have twice as much DNA, it codes for twice as many proteins typically. Although some of them don't. It's not like 1-to-1 all the time. But yeah, you do make just a lot more stuff that if you were making enough, in the previous generation of organisms, you don't need to make twice as much stuff necessarily. And maybe it's okay if you have 4 copies of chromosomes, but then if an organism has 8 copies of chromosomes, it's a lot of energy and effort to just spew out way more stuff when originally the DNA was putting out stuff at such a rate that was sufficient, 2 generations ago.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Klingons allegedly have basically a backup of all of their important organ systems. So that if they get stabbed, their backup organ will just take over and it's fine. I wonder if Klingons are polyploid. Maybe they have like a backup set of their own genetics, and there would be some evolutionary pressure to do that. Maybe they live in Klingons don't, but maybe this alien that has this identical gene set lives in a high radiation environment, and having a backup of your DNA could somehow be beneficial there.
Could be.
That could be interesting.
Yeah, the mutations that occur are less likely to totally derail whatever the DNA is coding for, because maybe a mutation didn't occur on this other chromosome, because I got 4 of each. Yeah, I could see that. Although, data storage best practices, they really should store those other chromosomes off-site.
Yeah, have an off-site backup of that.
You got to have 3, 2, 1. 3 copies, 2 media, is 1 off-site. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, and also, going back to the organs thing, we do have some organ redundancies too, right? We got 2 kidneys. So you don't necessarily have to be polyploid to have more kidneys.
True.
But you were just talking about maybe just down to a DNA level.
Yeah.
Could be beneficial to be polyploidy. Maybe. We do see, though, frequently that organisms that make a polyploid generation, eventually we do see them oftentimes revert back to being diploid. A process called diploidization. And it's probably because ultimately, having 2 copies is basically the sweet spot, right? It's great for making gametes.
Yeah.
It doesn't introduce as many problems in terms of replication and division during meiosis and mitosis. And you still have plenty of genetic variability when you combine the 2 haploid gametes and make offspring that, you get a mixed bag for the next generation, and more likely that something survives and makes offspring for the next generation. So yeah, polyploidy occurs, but it doesn't seem to be, at least especially in animals, because like I said, in plants it's fairly common. But in animals, we don't see it as often, and frequently in plants and animals, we see them revert back to being diploids eventually.
Cool.
Yeah.
So to answer Brandon's question.
Yes, we would probably be all polyploid, and if we didn't revert back, or if we didn't start doing meiosis again to really pare down the number of chromosomes we pass on, it would probably be really bad for the species within like a handful of generations. Like, let's say 5.
That's cool.
Because, yeah, at that point, there's just going to be so many errors in replication.
Well, thanks for your question, Brandon. And this is a nightmare that I didn't even know that I had, but now I'm going to have. Please do not ever have extra DNA. Thank you.
Yes, be thankful for meiosis. Thank you, meiosis. Sorry.
Oh, meiosis. Okay, let's take a quick break and come right back with another question. Julian, give me your best dinosaur roar.
Oh, God, an asteroid! It's horrible!
Wow, that was not where I expected that to go. We're popping in before the show to tell you about I Know Dino. It's a dinosaur podcast.
You know, we think of those dinosaurs being this thing that's been dead for tens of millions of years. Even so, studying dinosaurs can still teach us stuff that is relevant to the world today.
Yeah, like climate models to help us understand global warming.
Migration patterns of dinosaur lineages, they tell us about Earth's changing continents.
We can also study dinosaur diets, what plants lived then and maybe what animals and how they interact.
And, this is super cool, many dinosaur injuries, paleopathologies, they're the first known occurrences of diseases.
And they talk about all this kind of stuff on I Know Dino. It comes out every week with new dinosaur stories that you're not going to hear anywhere else. Like, I hadn't heard of a lot of these, which is pretty cool.
You can find I Know Dino on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts are. And if you found us, you can probably find them. Go check them out. Welcome back to That's Absurd. Please elaborate. We just answered Brandon's question about what would happen if all of our sperm and eggs had this exact identical DNA. And now it's time for Trace's question. Trace, who was your question from and what did they ask?
Okay, this question is from Tyler. And Tyler asked, what was the first word?
No, it wasn't.
You know what? Thanks for answering that question for me, Julian. And that's been this episode of... No, but seriously, folks. Woo! So Tyler wanted to know what the first word was. And they added, we've been speaking for thousands of years, but when/why/how did we start speaking in the first place? And what was the, parenthesis, most likely first word ever spoken? So
I bet this question is one that drives anthropologists crazy.
It absolutely does. When I did my research on this, almost all of the answers were like, no one can know this.
Yeah.
There's no way to
There's
know
no
this.
possible way, right? But they're still going to argue about it.
Well, yes, absolutely. They do argue about it, but there's no written evidence of verbal language. Like, writing came way later than verbal language.
Way later.
And verbal language isn't like easy to keep track of. You'd have to do it over millions potentially of years. A little bit of a hint there. So it's pretty serious stuff. But I think I can answer some of these questions with some satisfaction based on my research. And I feel pretty good about it. Because Tyler is asking, what was the first word? And when/why/how did we start speaking in the first place? So let's tackle that second part first. When/why/how. So when, again, truly unknowable answer. But I'm going to tease it a little bit and say when we started speaking is before humans existed.
Oh, okay.
Which is awesome. Like, maybe hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of years ago, there were already speaking species on our planet. Humans, like modern humans, Homo sapiens, did not exist yet, which is awesome. There is a lot of debate about when all this started, but pretty much everyone agrees that speech sounds happened prior to Homo sapiens, which is just wild to think about. Like, I read that and it took me a while to like just wrap my brain around it. You know, these ancient humans who existed prior to Homo sapiens, Neanderthal, Homo erectus, and a bunch of others, may have been able to talk. Which would mean when they did it is before there were people.
So speech predates us.
Yes! Like,
right.
Which is, oh my gosh. Okay.
That's cool. It also makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah.
Right? I don't see any reason why it should wait for humans to be a thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're pretty self-centered, so I feel like there are a lot of people who are like, oh, well, humans, we were the first ones to do everything. And it's like, actually, no, we just got the benefits of all of this millions of years of evolution. So let's touch on that briefly, though. I think this hits a little harder if you know what we're talking about. So I went to Encyclopedia Britannica, and I was like, let's go through the list of all the different ancient humans. So 6 million to 4 million years ago was Ardipithecus. It was kind of similar to a chimpanzee in size, but distinct. Obviously, the modern chimpanzee didn't come around for like millions of years after that, but it had something similar to that at the time. And it was already upright, and it was for a while before this. It didn't have like the canines that you think of when you think of a chimpanzee, and it lived mostly in trees. Then a little bit after that, in the 4 million to 3 million year ago range, we have Australopithecine, which is Lucy, and they overlap, by the way. It's not like we had Artie and then all the Arties are dead and there's like a Lucy. No, there's always overlap between all these different groups. So there's overlap with Artie. So Lucy could mainly walk, it had shorter legs, and its brain was already larger than what a modern chimp's brain is. And again, modern chimp wouldn't come around for millions of years after that still. The chimpanzee line was running parallel in different parts of the world.
We've split at this point.
We've already had a common ancestor. This is, again, millions of years ago. Then we're at 2 million to 1.5 million years ago, so we're getting closer to us, but still quite far away. Now we've Homo habilis. Homo habilis overlaps, of course, with Australopithecines. They are found, actually their fossil were found in Tanzania, so we've spread around the world already a little bit. And then this ancient human ancestor made tools. Actually, Homo habilis means handyman. Wasn't the first Homo to make tools. There were other ancient humans who could make tools as well. And there might have been other ancient humans in parallel, not just the Arties and the Lucys and the Habilises, but there's the Homo ergaster, which was a small tool-making Homo. There's also Homo floresiensis, which was around at this time, smaller in stature, a smaller brain, used tools, maybe used fire. They call this one hobbits because it's like little and cute. And then like between 2 million and 1.7 million years ago is the Homo erectus, which everyone knows because we were all in high school and loved laughing at that. And then we have
Homo.
Yeah. There's not enough to laugh at in the first word. Now we got 2 words to laugh at.
They'll love that. And now we're going to go switch to astronomy and teach them about Uranus.
Do you think Homo erectus saw Uranus?
The one in the museum saw mine.
Wow.
Because they're opposite each other at the nearby. There's a diagram. Anyway.
Sure. You just mooned. You mooned a mannequin at the museum. That's what I heard. So the Homo erectus, they lived in Africa, maybe in Asia. There could have been a different species in Asia that was like a relative. Either way, it was walking upright. It was using tools. It was living on the ground. And then about 100,000 years before the end, quote unquote, of this species, they left Africa and they were all over the place. And then, so now we're into like the hundreds of thousands of years ago. We've got Heidelbergensis, which is a separate branch from modern humans, but it overlaps with Erectus, and it was all over the world, and it built shelters, and it hunted large game with spears. And that alone is already a big deal, right? In order to be able to hunt large game and build things and have complex tools, it's not like they're writing down manuals. They can't just look at each other and make a complex tool. You have to be able to share that knowledge. So now we're starting to get to the area where there was definitely some kind of language going on. And then, of course, there are arguments that these Heidelbergensis and Neanderthals were closely related, but the Neanderthals were mostly in the European area of today, and Heidelbergensis was like in Northwest Africa and maybe Asia. And then we've got, of course, like I mentioned, Neanderthals. There's also Denisovans and Sapiens, which are us, and all of those are all around, all at the same time. I think that stupid illustration of like chimpanzee, somewhat taller chimpanzee, somewhat shorter human, you know, all the way to like human working on a computer. That's not how it is. It's really more of like a word cloud of different species all competing to see which ones are going to do the best. And some of them are actually working together and sharing with each other because they have similar enough traits. So Neanderthals, they had fire, they had wood and stone tools, they had social interactions, clothing and art, and they were mixing both socially but also genetically with the Homo sapien. And then 30,000 years ago, like we started 6 million years ago. We're up to 30,000. We get to us.
I just want to bring up that image that you described, right? Of the monkey to let more and more men like to man, right?
Yeah.
Is called the March of Progress. And biologists hate it.
I hate it.
It's
the
hate
worst.
that image because it has caused so much misunderstanding. It makes people think that evolution is a straight line instead of a web or maze with a lot of dead ends, and they hate it.
Oh, I think if anybody takes anything away from this part of this episode, this is a mess. This was all a huge mess. We're talking 6 million years. We've got Ardipithecus lucy or Australopithecines. We've got Homo habilis. We've got Homo ergaster, Homo florensis. We've got Erectus. We've got Heidelbergensis. We've got Denisovans. We've got Homo sapiens. And many of them are overlapping, and some of those can talk. Some of those. We think that as far back as 1.5 million years ago, so we're way back in the Homo habilis, that's the third one I said, probably could already speak. That's crazy, right?
That's cool.
So we're at Artie Lucy, and then in like that's it. We're at Homo habilis, and we're talking already. There's not going to be Homo sapiens for millions of years, and there was already language. Just to put it in perspective, when we look at oldie Englishy, that's like a few hundred years. Like that's nothing.
Sometimes I watch old movies and I'm shocked at how different English is. Like a Charlie Chaplin film where it says like show today, and there's like a hyphen between to and day.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh yeah, it evolves rapidly. Language does.
Incredibly rapidly. I mean, I am in my early 40s barely now, and it's just like, what are the kids saying? Like, I don't understand.
I don't know.
I love reading about slang because all slang is silly and dumb, and all older generations make fun of younger generations' slang. I ain't going to do that for real. I'm not going to make fun of that slang.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say no cap, Like, I think slang is very important. Every generation is able to make the words that they use. It's part of the culture. It's part of their fashion. It's part of them like taking over the world. And that's an important part of all of this. But now imagine that on a multi-million year scale. And that's how hard it would be to figure out what the first word is. So far, we've gone through when. When? Millions of years ago. Why? I don't know if I really have to answer that, Tyler. I'm pretty sure it's obvious why we would do this.
To plan a heist.
A time heist. We do know, however, how. I think that's a really interesting question. In studies of the vocal tract, that is pharyngeal cavity, the space for your tongue, how your throat and your mouth and your head are shaped and how they work, they started to do these studies to understand what proto-language might have looked like. Heidelbergensis had the ability to make vowel sounds, and just as a reminder that we're looking at like 600,000 years ago so like 500,000 years ago. They had the ability to make vowel sounds. And when I say vowel sounds, the reason I mention that is because that's how these phonetics studies go. They're looking for words like E, I, O, A, these kind of sounds are really important, and they can map them out in like frequency ranges, and it ends up in this like cool triangle, which I'll put one on our Instagram so you can kind of see what this looks like. But in these 3D models, they look and see that Heidelbergensis had the ability to make these vowel sounds, but whether their brains could do it is a whole other question. We don't know.
I was watching something recently because when I'm not like doing research for this show, I sit and watch anthropologists talking about human evolution for fun. And I think they were talking about Neanderthals. They brought up this thing of like they didn't have the correct head shape, like mouth and nasal cavity shape for making all the vowel sounds.
Yes.
And I also thought it was funny because that implies that we have all the vowel sounds, but what if there are undiscovered vowels that we cannot say because of our head shape?
Oh, that is an excellent thought. We should probably have somebody ask us that question. So that we can look into
yeah, if you want to submit the question I just asked. Because we like doing listener questions more than each other.
We don't want to just do each other's questions because inevitably every time we do this show, we're like, but that would be a good question.
Whoa.
But yeah, you're totally right. And good on you for remembering that. That was the next thing I was going to mention, that Neanderthals also had the ability to make these vowel sounds. And they are, of course, only a couple 100,000 years ago. They overlap with us very heavily. And their brains probably could do this. Like they could understand a language system of some kind, although not as well as us. We can make more sounds and we can do it more easily. So the first words, again, to recap, were before us. Why would we do it? Because it's important to share this knowledge and understand what's happening around us, right? Ancient humans who were not our species were likely already talking to each other when the first Homo sapien was born.
Cool.
Which, if that doesn't blow your mind, I don't know how to blow anyone's mind anymore.
That's
like,
cool.
The first Homo sapien baby, this mutant, pops out of their mother, who is not a Homo sapien, not literally, but like is
now we're getting to chicken and egg territory.
Right,
though,
exactly.
Like, where's the cutoff?
Yeah, and that is impossible to really determine based on how genes actually work. But like the idea would be at some point a Homo sapien pops out. And even if it's a gray area over hundreds of thousands of years, and that Homo sapien in this hypothetical situation can speak and is talking to something that is not a Homo sapien. So it's pretty amazing. The Homo sapiens have this horizontal and vertical space in their head that we can change with our tongue. I'm doing it right now. And that is how we can make all sorts of sounds. So we make all these noises because of the way our heads are shaped and the way our tongue can manipulate that, as well as how our throat muscles work. So there's a lot of different things that have to go into this. That vowel space that I mentioned earlier, the triangle of literal frequencies that we can make and discern, is not unlike, remember when we talked about Wi-Fi and like the different parts of the spectrum that we can use to do different things? This was a very early episode.
I do.
Yeah, it's not that different when we're talking about sounds, right? You can't just have two words that sound so similar that you can't tell the difference between them. You have to be able to put them far enough away from each other that they're discernible. And that is essentially what these kind of phonetic studies are looking at. So we've got the E in heed, we've got the I in hid, we've got the O in hood, we've got the O in hode, we've got the ah sound in hod, which is also an O, the way English spells it. We've got had, head, haid, and hood. All of those are different vowel sounds that you can map out to make that triangle. And it looks like some of these ancient species, Heidelbergensis and Neanderthals, and maybe even Homo erectus, could make many of those sounds. Not all of them, but many of them. And their brains, we don't really know if they could do it. But about 1.5 million years ago, the human brain went through this massive growth spurt over, again, a long period, like hundreds of thousands of years, and it reorganized itself. And parts of the frontal lobe where language processing is were growing. And so they think that maybe part of that was making tools, because it's also frontal lobe stuff, but maybe there is language in there as well, which is pretty cool. So now we've kind of answered the when, we've kind of answered the how, we've kind of answered the why. And I do want to retouch on why, because why might hint at what, right? It seems pretty obvious we'd want to talk to each other. You and your friend are, hanging out by a campfire, you're hunting during the day, you're sleeping in a cave, or you're sleeping in a shelter you've built at night, and you never speak for your whole lives? You never communicate in any way?
No, you never talk about celebrity gossip?
Yeah.
That's what it was, right? That was the most practical use of language.
Honestly, maybe.
600,000 years ago, right?
There are some researchers that I read that were like, gossip might have been a major...
No.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about even animal... Even like...
Dish, proto-girl.
Right.
Spill the tea that hasn't been invented yet.
So again, it's not knowable what the first word is, but we do see these things in some, even animal societies. They have words, not so much in the way that we use them, but communication that they use verbally or, auditorially. So Julian, if you had to guess what the first word might have been, what would you guess?
Okay, serious guess, not jokey, goofy guess.
Yeah, serious guess, sure. And also jokey, goofy guess, though. I want to know.
Something like, look out!
Like a danger signal, like we might see.
Danger!
A lot of birds do danger signals. Chimps, even plants have danger signals where they release volatile chemicals to tell each other that there's something going on. That is exactly where my mind went as well. Danger signals, I'm hurt, you don't want to be hurt. Those kind of signaling totally makes sense that what the first word might have been.
For example, there's even prairie dogs.
Yes.
Have a complicated, as far as we know, like kind of language. Like they have specific words for specific types of predators to alert other prairie dogs, like the nature of the danger and how to react.
Yeah.
And they also vary by like region to region.
Yeah.
So like researchers have categorized that as like, look, you could call this like
a language.
Words.
In words. Yeah.
Language.
Not in the way that we think of it. It's much more utilitarian. And I did look up the difference between kind of language and speech versus words and sounds. And they're usually differentiated by like language is describing concepts using sound parts, essentially. And they, like phonemes is what they're called. So you have these little phonemes and you combine them and you can describe a concept like anger, which is difficult to describe, but we have words for it and that helps us. Birds and these prairie dogs don't really have ways to describe things that complex. So calling it language is a difficult leap to make. Even calling it words might be tough, but it's definitely signaling. Like usually the words like signaling are used, or alarm calls, or things like that, where we try and take the words, language, and speech out of it. But it is somewhat of a debate still. I did a video with Joe Hansen a while back about the dialects of different sparrows, because there are different, even within the Bay Area in San Francisco, there are different dialects that are used by these different white-crowned sparrows. If you're in like the area around Golden Gate Park, they chirp at each other in one way, and then they go to a different area, even just a few miles away, and they chirp at each other a slightly different way. But they're using that as a communication tool. And so it's just neat to think of animals having these things, and it totally makes sense as to why humans would want this as well.
They code switch.
They
when
do.
They're in like an upscale part of town, they're all
Yeah.
formal, but then when they're with their friends in like the neighborhood they grew up in, they were like, "What's up, man?"
Yeah, they totally code switch all the time. Really important concept to understand. So I would like to take a moment here and say, audience, what do you think? Because we now have a phone number that you can call us and tell us what word you think was the first word. Just call us. It's a Google Voice number, 302 tape show, but without the W. If you type the W on your cell phone, it'll give you an error. So just
302 TAPESHO.
Yes, TAPESHO. Or if you want the numbers, it's 302-827-3746. You can call us and you can tell us what you think the first word might have been. Or, you can also just ask us a question. That's really why we did it. But my thoughts were danger, obviously a really important word. Also, home, food, ouch. We see this vocalization across nature. However, linguists looked at all the different languages spoken by modern humans, and they found lots of common ideas across those languages. In 700 of the 1,000 languages, they found one word specifically that kept showing up, and lots of common words. So some of the common words are like mama and papa, or
That's
dad
what I was thinking.
and mom, right? And
Yeah.
those, they think the reason that they're common is because they have some historical importance, right? They've been around for a long time, maybe 50,000 years, carried over from proto-language words like mama and papa. And in fact, the word that exists in 700 of the 1,000 languages have the word papa. And it exists in those languages and means a male relative on their father's side. This is according to research by Bancel and Mathieu de la Tang. And the commonality likely means that shared ancestry. It's a proto-language remnant, and, not the first word, for sure, but a very old word.
Probably one of the oldest.
And a
at
word
least.
we needed. You need to have a word for danger. You need to have a word for food. You probably need to have a word for home. You need to have a word for ouch. You need to have a word for mama, papa, or, other close siblings potentially, or whatever. Just depends kind of how human culture was millions of years ago. Another study was done looking at the first words that babies today, like modern babies, use throughout the last few hundred years.
And they found that a lot of them, their first words, which would be, a word that this Homo sapien baby that I mentioned earlier that pops out, one of the first words it's going to use might be food, but also might just be, hey. That's commonly one of the first words that you see infants say. It's just like, hey. Or like, hi.
Yo.
Hello.
Hi.
My kid's first word was, uh-oh. So.
See, danger.
Yeah, you never know. So, Tyler, we don't know what the first word was. No one's ever going to know what the first word ever uttered was. You'd have to go back and ask Homo erectus or Homo heidelbergensis. But what we do know is that the first word was said before the first Homo sapien was even born.
That's pretty cool.
Which is
I love that takeaway.
Super awesome.
We're also never going to know, even once writing becomes a thing, we're never going to know the first written word either.
Right.
Because the record's totally incomplete.
Yeah.
I
started looking up some of that. The oldest writing that we could find is like 20,000 years old, and it's on like a cave in Western Europe. They have these dots and slashes and then a Y symbol. And these one set of researchers, and I want to very clearly say it's just one set of researchers. This is still a debate, but they think they looked at the sequences and the slashes and the dots contained no more than 13 of them in a row. So they thought, okay, 13 could be a lunar calendar. And then they looked at the slashes that look like Y shapes, and they were near certain animal depictions, and they seemed to align on the 13 slashes with their approximate birthing seasons. So it could be that this was like a calendar where they were tracking the birthing animals near them, like for animal husbandry or hunting. But anyway, I thought that was pretty neat.
It's an interesting idea.
Yeah. So not a language, not a way to communicate outside of just that. It's just like a proto-writing, but 20,000 years ago, kind of neat. I looked that up. That was kind of cool. Yeah. So ./Y was maybe some of the first, and they were just saying like, yo, the cows are in heat, and they're about to birth. We're gonna go get them.
Fresh meat on the 6th dot of the year.
Happy 7th dot to you.
Happy 7th dot to you as well. And then that's the beginning of festivals. And then thousands of years later, traditions that nobody can explain.
Why do all the words end in day?
What?
It's because of those Y shapes, dating back to Western.
That's it. They started it. The days that end in Y. Wow, amazing. Totally factual. I hope that whoever was listening was paying close attention and not half listening and then goes quoting that at a cocktail party. Because again,
or do and tell them to come listen to our show, and they'll hopefully listen to this episode and be like, Frank was full of poop. He was full of poop.
Completely off base. That's not what they said at all. I'm going to call that number and complain.
Or you can text it.
Oh.
Just so you know. 302 Tape Show with an O, not the W.
With no W.
Without the W. Or Tape Sin. It means a bunch of things. Anyway, thanks, Tyler, for asking your question and for sending it to us and letting me deep dive into this, because that was really fun.
Yeah, that was fun. Well, that is going to do it for this episode of That's Absurd. Please elaborate. We'd like to thank you again for listening. The show was written, produced, and created by me, Julian Huguet.
And me, Trace Dominguez.
And it was produced and edited by the wonderful, wonderfully talented, and man who knows many words, Kyle Sisk.
Special thanks to the listeners who submitted their questions for this episode. We really appreciate every question that is sent in, and we'd like to thank Brandon and Tyler for that. If you want to submit a question, you can look for the form down in the show notes right here on whatever podcast app you're using to listen to this show. You can go to that'sabsurdshow.com/ask and fill out that same form. You can even just email us at hello@that'sabsurdshow.com, and now you can call us at 302-TAPESHO, 302 Tape Show. And we cannot do this show without your questions. So the more ways we can get those questions, the better.
Finally, a special thank you to those listening on Nebula. Nebula listeners get to access ad-free versions of episodes. They can support us and other independent creators directly. So to join Nebula, visit go.nebula.tv/that'sabsurdshow.
And of course, remember, don't double your DNA. 2 halves are plenty.